the season's second tropical system, and it's hurricane season today. So we have Tropical Depression 2, and we'll tell you why it's 2 and not 1. It's in the northeast Gulf of Mexico. Heat in the northeast got there today, and it's going to be there on Friday ahead of a cold front. Big changes coming to the northeast and mid-Atlantic states for the weekend when that weather front passes through. We'll be talking about all of these subject matters in great detail tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. And get your truck over there if you're a professional or do it yourself and get all the mulch, topsoil, and sand and anything else you need to make your home look great. 631-756-1125 is the phone number. Nowhere can you find better prices, and the website is
Omni True Value. Come.
And our affiliate, Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the chat board. It's pinned to the top, and they also have all sorts of other weather gadgets and weather gizmos and the latest in weather fashion. If you do decide to make a purchase, remember to use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show because
you will get 10 big % off of anything that you purchase. So get on out there and buy something, for goodness sake.
Please, yes, please. Mr. Rayo is back. Mrs. Rayo filled in, did a wonderful job, as she always does.
We were watching. I was watching last night from my seat at Citi Field. I have to admit I wasn't able to hear very much from my phone because of the ambient noise being created by 40,000 or so other people who were surrounding me, but I was able to, see you and see her, and it's nice to know that wherever I am and wherever I go, from 7:35 in the evening most weeknights, here we are at the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Whether or not I'm there or not, or whether you're there or not, it's nice to have the ability of being able to tune in.
Yes, and you can tune in Monday through Thursdays at 7:35 and Sundays at 11 a.m. and Fridays and Saturdays we're off unless the world comes to an end, and we don't think it's going to do that. But you never know. Did you get your bobblehead?
Yes, I did.
You're not going to show us?
I left it upstairs, and you know what? I didn't even take it out of the box, and I'm thinking about never taking it out of the box because I've seen on eBay and some of these places already that people are asking anywhere from like $30 to $60 or
$70,000.
So, I mean, I've seen it in action. My son took his out, and you push the button, and you hear the signature line from Howie Rose: "Put it in the books." By the way, Howie Rose, if he happens to be watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight, because the Mets played already this afternoon, Howie, keep your day job and night job. Do not get into, because last night they had him throw one of the ceremonial first pitches.
Uh-huh.
No, it ain't going to work, Howie. How it was an embarrassment. So let's put it that way.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So we had a very warm, and in some places in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, you could call it a hot day. Anthony Orr, our resident hurricane statistician, messaged me and told me that I think he said it got to 93 today in Scranton. I believe he said 93.
Well, it got to 91 here in Putnam Valley, but it did not get to the 90-degree mark at Central Park. If I may be wrong, I don't think Central Park has gotten to 90 yet so far this year.
Even back in April, they didn't do it on any of those days. You know what? I think you're right. I Newark got to 90. I know that.
Right.
But I don't. Yeah, maybe they didn't. Yes, the high today in Scranton was 93, which ties the record high that was set back in 1937.
Wow.
So I also noticed that I think I saw Peter Hall, who's a big cheese weather guy up in Syracuse who was my intern back in the 90s. I don't know if he watches this show religiously, but if he does, big hello to Peter. I saw him post on Facebook that it got to 91 in Syracuse. I don't remember things anymore. I have to write things down. 91, and it was the first time since last year, late August, that Syracuse got to 90, and also it was just 1 degree shy of the record. It may have topped that and set the record, but anyway, it's been it's a few places today getting to the 90-degree mark. There'll be a lot more tomorrow. Now, here's the thing. The cold front's going to come through sometime late Friday night or early Saturday morning. There are going to be some showers and maybe some thunderstorms that develop inland. I made the case yesterday that the air might be just a little bit too stable down near the coast. And one of the things I noticed was looking at the soundings, Joe, down near the coast. Like, for example, I just popped up LaGuardia. The Cape at LaGuardia, the Cape value was basically a single-digit number. And it showed east winds. So I'm going to just stand by. I'm thinking we'll probably see some storms form in northern Connecticut, Massachusetts, maybe north of you. And then as they start to move southward, especially if they start coming, if they're a little later in the evening and they come after 7 or 8 o'clock, that they may just weaken by the time they get down to the coast.
It's possible. Still, I wouldn't leave out the risk of a thunderstorm. Interestingly, at SPC, which I'm sure we'll look at in just a very few moments, SPC normally does not talk about thunderstorm activity, unless the area is marginal or slight or enhanced or whatever. That's when you get a discussion as to what may happen. General thunderstorm coverage, I don't usually get anything in terms of a discussion, but yet the Northeast, which is under general thunderstorm possibility tomorrow, they did mention earlier today in the Northeast, while the activity is not likely to be all that impressive, that there is enough instability and enough potential with this front to foster the potential for some hit or miss, locally severe or locally heavy activity. So they did mention that, even though, again, even though it's just expected to be general thunderstorm coverage, what they're saying is that, just keep an eye on the sky tomorrow afternoon if you're outside. And if you are going to if you're going to encounter a thunderstorm, don't be surprised if it could be locally nasty for a few minutes, even though you may not be under the risk of that type of activity.
And the other thing that I thought was somewhat impressive too is that after this front goes by, we're going to see a pretty sharp change in temperatures on Saturday. And I might as well let me bring up the map here. There's a few things we could do. I thought we'd do the tropical depression first, but let's do this first since we're on the subject matter. So these are the forecast highs off the digital forecast from the Weather Service for tomorrow. And as you can plainly see, I'll make it a little bit bigger on the screen, it's upper 80s and low 90s. Just about everywhere. The only exceptions will be the shore areas in eastern Long Island, the south coast of Rhode Island, and southeastern and into the Cape, where it's in the low 70s and even the 60s for highs. But we're looking at a lot of low and even a few middle 90s in eastern Pennsylvania, western New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, on up into Connecticut, and even further north up into Massachusetts. But then take a look at the map they got for Saturday. The temperature changes are pretty impressive. Now, the thing is, I'm not sure. I got to think that some of these highs that you see in New Jersey, where they're in the 70s, that probably might be left over Friday night. But look at southeastern New England, Joe, mid 50s mid to upper 50s eastern Long Island, low to mid 60s back to northeast New Jersey, coastal northeast New Jersey and coastal New Jersey. Then they have 70s and they still have some 80s left over in south central Pennsylvania. That's probably due to the timing of whenever that front finally gets down there. But if you're north and east of New York City on Saturday, you're going to have a rude awakening. Worcester is supposed to go to 93 or 94 tomorrow, and they only have a 55 for them on Saturday.
It's like going to be a cold slap in the face. And interestingly, especially in the summertime, typically when you have hot temperatures and uncomfortable conditions, you look to the north and west for some kind of a weather front approaching, or maybe an upper level low pressure system that drops on down, or a short wave that sweeps across the region and turns the winds into the north. But this is going to be rather unusual. This is going to be something that's going to be dropping out of eastern Canada and moving southwestward.
Yes.
And at the same time, as it's moving southwestward, it's slowly but surely wrapping up or intensifying. So yeah, this is going to be a type of setup. But
it's a weird trough setup.
Yeah.
And it's kind of blocky. So yeah, it's going to be backing northeast to southwest. It is a little bit, and you get the backdoor cold fronts that do that, but this really isn't a typical backdoor cold front, because those are really shallow and they seldom come with thunderstorms. They usually just sort of go by, and you get the wind shift, and then you get into the marine air behind it, and oftentimes it gets cloudy and drizzly behind it. This one, it may still do that, but this one's a little different because we got, we may have those thunderstorms that are going to form ahead of it.
You might call it, and I mentioned this a couple of nights ago, instead of a back door, you might just call it a side door front. It's coming in more from the east and northeast as opposed from the north and northeast.
All right, so we'll come back to this in a little bit. So let me clear these out of here, and let's go to this system that is spinning away in the visible satellite loop, which I just refreshed. You can see the latitude and longitude lines popped up there for a couple of frames. You could see the low-level circulation, which earlier today got underneath the convection. But now I'm noticing on the loop here, on the last half a dozen or so frames, that it looks like the low-level center is dropping southward, and you're getting shear blowing the top, a little shear going on, blowing the tops away to the northeast. Yeah, the Hurricane Center in their discussion talked about a small window here between now and tomorrow, or at least part of tomorrow, where this might strengthen into a minimal tropical storm. I'm looking at this now in terms of the visible. It would sort of argue that maybe it won't do that. And the other thing is, none of the precip that's with the tropical depression is on land. There are no coastal warnings or watches up. There's no tropical storm watches, nothing like that. It's all offshore, and it's going to begin a southward drift, which is what they are forecasting here. They do have it as a tropical storm, becoming a tropical storm tonight and into tomorrow afternoon, and then it moves south and then southeastward as a depression, weakening. By the time at 1 a.m. Sunday, they have it as a remnant depression over western Cuba. It makes sense considering, if we can have a cold front in the northeast moving southwest, we can have a depression in the Gulf of Mexico moving southward instead of maybe west or northwest or north.
It's kind of an unorthodox type of path that you would expect for a tropical system. I mean, normally, if you see the initial position to be where it is, the 4 p.m. position somewhere in the central Gulf, you'd say, oh, okay, tropical depression there. It may strengthen, but it has a very short life, because if it moves the typical or classic way north or northeast, it's going to be over land very quickly. You don't really expect to see something like this moving south, but that's what this one is going to do. And I tell you, if it stays over water a bit longer and slows down a little bit, hey, it can pump up and become a little stronger, and may surprise a few people. If I were on the western end of Cuba right now, I'd be a little concerned, more than just a little concerned, about what may be coming our way or their way for later on in the weekend.
Yeah, the upper air though is so unfavorable though, with strong winds aloft, that this thing is probably going to wind up getting sheared apart. It's at 28 north and 86.6 west. So it's way out there, away from any land. Top of winds are carrying 35 miles an hour. Movement west-northwest at 2. All right, so it's basically in a crawl state at the moment. So we'll see if it does assume a southward drift, which is what the Hurricane Center is indicating in their official forecast. And when we get to the other maps, we could show it a bit more. In the meantime, when we go to the watches and warnings map, which is now refreshing on its own, you see where they have the red is way out into the coastal waters, where they have tropical storm warnings out there. But there's no, they have what looks like either small craft or gale warnings up in I don't even think they have gale warnings up, unless they have them up in the marine areas well offshore, beyond the 20-mile limit, and then small craft advisories right near the coast. Meanwhile, you see we still have air quality issues. I saw a few of you on the chat board tonight still complaining about the smoke that's been around in southern Connecticut, Long Island, New Jersey, down into Delaware and Maryland. Also, it continues in parts of western New York and in and around the Great Lakes states. And the smoke that we're seeing here in our neck of the woods, eastern PA to southern New England, it's coming from the Nova Scotia wildfires, and that all was brought in behind the backdoor front from the other day, and the onshore flow that we had for a couple of days. Flash flood watches in North Texas and northeastern New Mexico. We have a waning severe thunderstorm watch up in parts of northwest Texas. Also, a lot of flash flood watches up in Wyoming, westernmost Nebraska, and on up into Montana. Also in southeastern Florida, where we're seeing some flash flood watches up there. And we'll get the latest Cioffi map here and take a look at what they've got analyzed down in the Gulf of Mexico. From earlier tonight, it was just a simple low, but now they've got the recon found 1,008 millibar low, so they got 1,007 low analyzed here on the 21Z or the 5 p.m. surface map. Just one nice closed isobar. I don't see. There's a couple of I'm looking at the wind barbs out in the coastal waters. I see a 25 knot wind barb from the northeast, northwest of the low center, 20 knots, 10 knots, 15 knots. So there's nothing really here that's screaming strong winds, at least at the moment. And as we said, it's not impacting any land areas, not really expected to. And even when we check out the radar, Joe, you see the precip with the depression is way offshore. You're getting some tropical flow that's bringing scattered showers and thunderstorms in the state of Florida, but it's not in and of itself. It's not really doing much of anything to any of the land areas.
And so that's good.
Yes,
I would hope.
Yeah. Something like this in later, later in June, or certainly if this was later in July or August, would probably have a higher probability of having a different type of outcome in terms of strengthening and everything else that goes with that. But I'm just not really seeing it here. Meanwhile, take a look. The front's getting ready. North of the Canadian border, there's some pretty hefty thunderstorms there into the St. Lawrence River Valley, the upper part of the St. Lawrence River Valley, moving southward from Canada. They've also actually moved up into parts of northern Maine, and you see some heavy showers and storms that go well back to the west in Ontario province. But the Northeast and Mid Atlantic not doing much, just a few widely scattered pop-ups in the southeast and in the Gulf states. Then we've got some heavy activity in north central Illinois, in southwestern Michigan, northwest Indiana, scattered up through Wisconsin, a little more numerous in east central Kansas, on up into Nebraska. And then you got this mess back in Texas and New Mexico, where we're seeing a few severe thunderstorm warnings and a couple of flash flood warnings too. At the moment, we're not seeing any kind of really organized lines of storms here. They're just all sort of splotchy, and they go all the way up the Rockies.
And right, today is the day when the U.S. Drought Monitor has released a new map. And I mentioned this a few days ago that because of the extremely dry weather here in the Northeast, they were probably going to be seeing a spread of abnormally dry conditions.
Do you want to share it?
I would love to if you
Please do.
could. And here it comes in just a moment. And there you go.
All right, hold on. I got to get rid of this. Hang on a second. I got to bring you back. Okay.
Bring me back.
There you go.
Yeah, so you can see that the entire state of Pennsylvania is under now abnormally dry conditions, and that there are a few spots. I'm not sure which. I'll zoom in on Pennsylvania for a second here. And what are we talking about? We're talking about Schuylkill, Lebanon, the western half of Berks County, and much of Lancaster County, all under moderate drought. As you can see, virtually the entire state, save for, was one little area right here near the central Jersey border, extreme eastern Bucks County. That's the only place I could see that's in white. Everywhere else, it's either yellow, indicating abnormally dry, or again, moderate drought in these counties I just mentioned. So this is most interesting. New York State, the southern tier of New York, under abnormally dry conditions. All of Long Island, for Connecticut, southern or southeastern Connecticut, moderate drought. Abnormally dry. Abnormally dry also for parts of eastern Massachusetts near Cape Cod, and western Massachusetts into the Berkshires. Much of Vermont now experiencing abnormally dry weather. Northern sections of New Hampshire, and also much of northern Maine, also abnormally dry. And again, if these conditions persist, we really don't see all that much wetness between now and this time next week. You can expect more abnormal dryness across areas that are in white right now, and maybe even more in the way of moderate drought, or especially in Pennsylvania. So it's not a serious situation yet, but it's evolving into one. Meanwhile, the place that is most in dire need of wetness or water would be eastern Nebraska, a good part of Kansas, portions of Oklahoma, and north central sections of Missouri, which are in a shade of deep red. And I would presume that is indicative. The extreme drought for these areas. So it's not great in the central part of the nation. At this time last year, we had severe drought conditions occurring over the southwestern states, and especially over California. But notice, because of all of that wetness that was experienced during the wintertime, California is in pretty good shape, and so is Arizona, and even much of New Mexico. Northern portions of Texas are in droughty conditions, severe drought in some cases, but really compared to last year, not as bad as it was. But again, that can change in the days and weeks to come if we don't see a lot of moisture falling across the Central Plains and also here in the northeastern United States as well.
Okie dokie. And there's no sign of this dry pattern, by the way, going away anytime soon. The way things are setting up in the Northeast and Northern Mid Atlantic states. You see on the satellite loop, the first few frames, you got that milky white is some of the smoke. The clouds are still pretty stubborn in Southern Virginia into North Carolina. That's where the gloom and doom set up this week with this backdoor cold front. And as we go a little bit wider on the U.S. view, you can see the colors are all lightning strikes, and you see a bunch of them in Florida, picking up a little bit of convection with the tropical depression. And by the way, I meant to mention this before, it's Tropical Depression 2, And you're going to say, well, when did we have Tropical Depression 1? Just back a few weeks ago, we discussed the fact that the Hurricane Center made a mid-January offshore coastal storm a subtropical storm. So that becomes the first system for the year, and that's why this one is number 2 and not number 1. And you see the lightning strikes going on in the Western Plains and on up through the Central Plains and further back up into the Northern Rockies. The Storm Prediction Center tonight has a marginal to slight risk in portions of West Texas and eastern New Mexico, also eastern Wyoming and westernmost Nebraska and South Dakota. General thunderstorms in northernmost New England, general thunderstorms in Florida, along the immediate Gulf Coast, and then carrying itself all the way up the Mississippi Valley and into the rest of the Plains and Rockies. Now, for tomorrow, not indicating any severe weather risk in the Northeast. Although, as Joe mentioned earlier, there probably is the chance that there could be an isolated severe thunderstorm here and there. But we do have marginal to enhanced risk, again in the Western Plains, with West Texas being in that enhanced risk, and a 2 to 5% tornado risk comes with that. And then as we move on to Sunday, this is Saturday into Sunday. General thunderstorms for central PA, down into Maryland, southern Delmarva, Virginia, and points further south. The Northeast is done from that respect because of where the front has already come through. And you see also up in the plains, in the Rockies, and back out into the southern plains as well, we have a general thunderstorm risk there. And with respect to rainfall, they were kind of they were pushing back that quarter to a half inch line. Now they've pushed it further to the east. Central and northern New England, 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half, but it rapidly cuts off. There's barely a tenth of an inch, a tenth to a quarter being indicated back to about New York City, Long Island, southern Connecticut, northeast New Jersey. Then it goes up as you go up in upstate New York, but then it drops down to less than a tenth of an inch across the rest of New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and no rain in southern New Jersey in the next 7 days, southwest into the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area in northeastern Virginia. 3/4 of an inch to some places 2 to 3 inches from the southern plains northwestward up through the Rockies, also central and south Florida, an inch to as much as 2 or 3 inches in a few places, and even the southeast really not showing a whole lot with regards to rain. Now, I'm just going to say this, Joe, and I always try to, we always talk about the trend being your friend. We use that when referencing models in the wintertime. Well, you know what? The trend is also your friend this time of year when it's dry and you get into a dry pattern. You really need something impressive usually to break through. So when you get these systems that are not exactly the most impressive systems in the world, sometimes the models will try to overdo the thunderstorm activity, in my view. And I think this is what's going to happen tomorrow. GFS actually was showing on earlier runs some bigger cells further south into Connecticut and the Hudson Valley. It's kind of backed off here a bit. And I was looking around at all the other models. None of them are really showing any kind of, I'm not saying that there won't be a shower or a storm. There could be, certainly, particularly as you go north. I think if you're in northern Connecticut, the middle and upper Hudson Valley into Massachusetts, up into New Hampshire and Maine, yeah, you're going to get some thunderstorms. But if you're further south from there, don't be too shocked if you wind up seeing very little out of this. I just think that there's going to be enough of a marine influence late tomorrow afternoon with some sea breeze action, Joe, that it's going to keep the thunderstorms from holding together as they move south.
I would agree. I would absolutely agree. And some of that marine air may actually preclude New York City from making it to 90 tomorrow. I know that the forecasts in some cases are calling for like 91, 92, but don't be surprised if they happen to get a shower slipping on through during the afternoon hours and enough of a wind off of the ocean, it may just stop at 88 or 89. New York, it's been so hard for them to get to. But meanwhile, where I am, today was like the fourth or fifth day going back to April that we've had temperatures at or above 90 degrees. So
Yeah.
again, everything depends upon where you are. Inland areas, again, likely to really heat up tomorrow as opposed to areas near and along the coast, which probably will stay in the muggy 80s as opposed to the hotter 90s.
The Cape values, okay. The SB Cape 5. This is at LaGuardia. I just kind of put a random point tomorrow evening. And the ML Cape 11. The MU Cape is 94. So I don't know what the D Cape is. Do you have any clue?
No, I don't.
Okay. The PWatts. I know you like the PWatts.
Oh,
1.34. That's not exactly screaming.
No, but the water equivalent or the water amount for precipitation. We're not talking about a tropical storm, but
they also. I was just looking at it on the sounding. Its temperature at LaGuardia at tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. of 74, and a dew point of 58. I mean, I would have liked to see those dew points up above 60. I mean, it's not. I don't know. I just don't think it's a setup for severe weather. I certainly could be wrong. And watch how these cells, by the way, on the GFS, how they move southwestward. I mean, they basically look. We're always used to looking at things coming in from the west or the southwest or even from the northwest, but not too often from the northeast. And that's what this whole thing is, just basically sliding down.
Right.
And it doesn't really do very much on Saturday in terms of precip, although there is a little bit of a gradient south of New York City with the isobars that pushes that next high, just builds also moving northeast to southwest. It's coming from Labrador and just going southwestward into New York State. This is one of the strangest looking setups I've seen in a long time.
Right. We have somebody on the chat board, in fact, who is in New Brunswick, Canada guy. And welcome to Joe and Joe. But he's talking about his bout of precipitation from this system. Anybody in Atlantic Canada, this whole mess is going to go right through them. And it's good. It's good because especially in Nova Scotia, where they've had those wildfires, they could use a bit of moisture to help firefighters douse all of that extreme fire activity. Tom Contino has been ranting about what's going on up in Canada, and I demand an investigation. I'm sure that
call the Canadian mounted geese.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. I mean, this has been many times worse in terms of wildfire activity up in Canada as opposed to other years. This is one of those unusual anomalies, and they're rolling with the punches and doing their best to try to shut all of this down. I know people don't appreciate. And somebody wrote to me yesterday, Joe. And I asked me, he said, "Why is it that the smoke is so much worse now as opposed to recent weeks?" And I said, "Well, think about it. I mean, we've been dealing with airborne smoke from Alberta and British Columbia. How many thousands of miles away is that?" I said, "Now we're getting smoke from Nova Scotia. How far is Nova Scotia from the tri-state New York area?" I mean, it's not exactly walking distance, but it's really just a stone's throw to the northeast. And if it comes on down on a northeast flow, it's apt to be a bit thicker and a bit more prolific as opposed to smoke that came from the western part of North America and had a chance to at least disperse or semi-disperse. That's why this Nova Scotia situation makes it more difficult or more tough to deal with as opposed to the smoke that we've been dealing with from the western half of Canada over the last few weeks.
Now, I brought up the 500 just to talk about, go back to the depression, tropical depression number 2. This is not an upper air that is supportive of strengthening. There is a very, very small hole here. Did you see where the light green and blue I'll draw a circle around it. How's that? So that's right in there. That little area there. That's where the low center was sitting for much of the day in this one little pocket where the winds aloft were a bit on the light side, and the Hurricane Center actually mentioned that to an extent in their discussion, describing what was going on with uh, the clouds and some of the development that was going on the west side. But as it moves southward, and it's going to do that, it's just going to be in this mess of screaming winds in the upper atmosphere of 30 to 40 knots. I mean, it just has no chance, Joe. It's got no chance to develop much beyond whatever it does between now and, say, tomorrow morning. If it doesn't strengthen in that time frame, then it's just going to get overwhelmed by these westerlies.
Just going to rip and shred it up.
Yep, absolutely. So that pretty much, in my mind, takes care of that. And if we go back to what's happening here for Saturday, of course, again in that northeast flow, and the high coming in, the front coming from the northeast, the high building in from the northeast. Sure, it can't happen in the wintertime. You got to set up like this in the wintertime is when you probably go down below zero. But that's not happening. And anyway, the front's just going to sort of sag its way to the south. Sunday's now looking like a pretty good day. You know, back days ago, I thought Sunday would be fine, and then it just started trying to do some weird things, and that turned out to be nonsense. So it looks like Sunday is going to be the better of the two weekend days, although on the cool side, and that'll last into Monday. Then we got another front, but this one's coming more from the northwest that's going to move through, and that's going to come through dry, Joe, on Monday evening, and another cool high and rotation going on in eastern Canada sets up for a rather chill. Well, for this time of year, it's going to be on the cool side. I almost want to use the word chilly, but certainly on the cool side for a good portion of this week. I think the temperatures this week, all week long, could wind up being below average.
Well, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning here, we had temperatures down to 43 here in Putnam Valley. Now today, I was forced. When the temperature topped 90 or 91, I said, that's it. I had it. I closed the windows and turned on the air conditioning. That's it. We've really been seeing wide swings of the temperature pendulum, over the last few days. And again, as you point out, hot one for tomorrow in many, especially inland communities. And then in comes that much cooler airflow once again for the start of the weekend.
Yep. So
Canada guy says Nova Scotia had hardly any snow this winter, hardly any rain this spring. And I kind of hearkening back to last September. You remember Hurricane Fiona, one of the worst or the most threatening tropical systems to hit Nova Scotia and also adjacent Newfoundland in many years. And how many people, as that storm was approaching, is probably saying something like, "Oh no, terrible storm, and then we're going to have this winter." And it's going to carry over into the spring next year. And we're going to be terrible. It's terrible. And what happened? After Fiona moved on through, as New Brunswick, Canada guy mentioned, boom, hardly any snow for this past winter season. They haven't seen all that much rain. I'm wondering how many people out there were saying, we don't need the rain. We don't need it. Well, sometimes you have to be very careful at what you wish for.
Yep.
And so far, maybe you made payment with Fiona last September, because ever since then, hasn't been all that much to write home about.
I had a nice day today weather-wise overall. The mornings here have been really cool. We've been down in the 50s. It's been, I got to go outside with a sweatshirt on. Once the sun, after about 8:30, and the sun is, high enough where it's over the mountain, and we had some clouds this morning, so it took a little while. But once the sun gets on you, then you just take the sweatshirt comes right off. But it's been really nice. It has, and the days have been great here. But they haven't been that humid. The dew points have been reasonable. Temperatures today, I think I got to 75 or 76 was my high. I'm cooler than I'm much cooler than you.
Yeah.
And I certainly haven't seen a 90. I haven't seen anything remotely close to 90 degrees. I think we've had a day or two where I've gotten. I think I got to one day where it got to 80 here,
What is your
and that's
elevation
it.
again? 2,200 feet?
Roughly 22.
22. So let's see, dry adiabatic, it's a 7. So you're about 8 or 9 degrees lower than, let's say, someplace at sea level.
Right.
So at that, in order for you to get to 90 degrees at all, you would need to see, places like Atlanta or places closer to sea level get into the upper 90s to near 100. And where you are, then maybe you might get to 90.
Tom says, did it hit 90 last year? It did actually on 2 days. It got to 90. I think one day it got to 90, the other day it got to 91. And the summer before that, because this is now my third summer here, the summer before that, zilch. Did not get to 90 degrees at all. It got to 89 a couple of times, but it did not get to 90. So I recommend the mountains of North Georgia for those of you who are thinking about a nice place to retire to. Just don't move close to me. Although that's not, I shouldn't say that. I don't really mean that. But nothing here is really close. So it's not like you're buying in subdivisions where houses are on top of each other. You're pretty far spaced out in a town that only has 750 people and a county that only has 14,000 people.
See, now, if in New York State, if you lived at 22 or 2,300 feet above sea level, I'm sure the summer times would be okay. I mean, you would not see the extremes of heat like what we're seeing at lower elevations or whatever. The problem is, unlike Joe, since Joe is located so far south, the wintertime, you'll see a little bit of snow down where he is.
Well, you know what? Everyone's not every year, but every few years or so, they get a sizable snowfall here.
Right.
And as I've said many times, I live 10 minutes away, not even 10 minutes away from Brasstown Bald, which is Georgia's highest peak, which is just under 5,000 feet, and it's. There were a number of times last winter when I looked at the camera up at Brasstown Bald where it was, snowing like crazy, and they shut the roads here. It's like in upstate New York with the lake effect on the thruway. They got the things that the things that come down and shut the exits off, the entrance and exits off. They have those here because they have to shut. They do shut the roads down here during the wintertime when it snows. It has happened.
But what I'm talking about is that as compared to you say, oh, every once in a while you get to. But I mean, I'm not talking about every once in a while. I mean, up here in New York State, you live at 2,300 feet.
Oh, right. You're going to get you're in Chuck Cardillo land, so you're going to just get he's up at 3,000. Chuck's at 3,000 feet. He snows every time somebody runs the water. I mean, it just snows like crazy up there in most years. So anyhow, we usually do Briller Jeopardy. But I am like really tired. I woke up super early this morning, so I'm sort of out of sorts. So we're going to save it for Sunday. Okay. So Sunday at 11 a.m. we will be back. Now, if by chance those thunderstorms, it starts to look like that those thunderstorms are going to go completely against my forecast and wind up with some severe weather. I don't know if you're busy tomorrow night. Are you busy tomorrow night?
Where am I going?
Yeah, okay. So, in the event that there's a severe weather threat tomorrow night, then maybe we'll come on and do a quick live show tomorrow night. Otherwise, we will be back on Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So, mark it down.
He's got, this is a night Tom wants to complain about everything.
Oh, I know. He's got him twisted tonight.
These two men always want to go to bed so early. Well, Tom, when you get up into your 60s like Joe and I are, and let me assure you, going to bed early, Joe and I used to work at hours. Our day started at 2 o'clock in the morning, Well,
when I worked at FiOS, Joe, I wasn't getting, I was working till, with you, we were leaving at 10 o'clock, and I wasn't getting home till, like midnight.
Which bridge did you take when you used to go home back to Long Island? Throgs
Neck.
I
used to play. Well, I used to try to get the Throgs Neck, but as I used to get with John Hausman because John lived on Long Island too. So we would, leave it. I would usually leave about I would leave about 15 minutes before he did. So I was the guy that got to check to see if there was traffic on any of the bridges, and I would message him and I'd tell him if there was traffic on the Throgs Neck because they were doing construction. I would message him and say take the Whitestone.
Right.
That was my job.
Right.
To make sure he got home easy.
Last night, the Mets had a 4-1 lead going into the ninth inning. And I went with my sister and I went with my son. And I turned to the two of them and I said, because I'm the one supplying the transportation.
Right.
And I said, why don't we leave now? I just don't have a good feeling about this. There was a packed house. It was Howie Rose bobblehead night. I said, why don't we leave now? And I was voted down 2-1.
Why did they close the 2 of the 3 lanes on the Whitestone Bridge?
I have well, first of all,
were they doing construction work?
Yeah, they were. Although I didn't see a single construction
worker.
worker.
Of course you didn't.
But when we got there, when we got to Citi Field, I usually park in the marina. It used to be known as the World's Fair Marina. I parked in my usual space at the marina. P.S. It's $40 now to park. I imagine paying right off the bat $40 to park your car for a baseball game. And then, by the way, they didn't take any money. They only wanted credit cards. If I didn't have my credit card on me, I don't know what I would have done because they were not accepting regular bills. But I parked where I usually have been parking for the last God knows how many years. And then the cops come to me and they say that we wanted to start walking to the ballpark. And they said, you can't go this way. And I'm saying, why? He says, it's not safe anymore. Because I guess because they had some strange traffic, whatever like that. So it says, where am I going to park? He said, you'll park by the opening by the gate. Now, I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. So we started walking and looking and looking and looking and looking. We couldn't find the opening at the gate. What opening? So my son says, get back in the car. So I moved out of my parking space, followed him. He's running down to the other side of the parking area. And we finally found this little opening in the gate. And so I parked the car. We go through this opening. Now I don't know where the hell I am because I'm on that side of Citi Field. I knew Shea Stadium like the back of a book. I don't know what the heck's going on now with this configuration with Citi Field. I was on Seaver Way on 123rd Street. We're walking now alongside. We finally got into the stadium, into the ballpark. And I said to myself all through those whole episode, I said, we leave, there's going to be problems. There's going to be problems. I just know. And I wanted to leave early. They didn't want to. So I said, okay. And we went out. So we had to get our bearings straight, try to find where the blankety blank car was or whatever. And what the cops were doing was that they were pushing all of us onto the Grand Central Parkway. Now, I want to go back to the Bronx, to the Whitestone Bridge. They're sending me on the Grand Central Parkway west toward the Triborough Bridge.
Toward the Triborough.
And so imagine, if you will, just a sea of brake lights and a sea of cars. And I'm saying, and meanwhile, my wife and my daughter were back at home. They're tracking me. I'm using the GPS.
Oh, good Lord.
And so my daughter calls my wife and she says, why is Dad at LaGuardia Airport? And I'm saying to myself, I know at night there's a 94th Street exit at LaGuardia where I can go make a left turn over an overpass, then turn around and start moving
back the other way. Yeah,
back the other way. And I thought of Fred Mertz. I turned around to my sister, who was in the back seat, and she doesn't drive. And I said, oh, I'm trying to go to Philadelphia. I know I'm trying to go to Boston. I'm taking a shortcut through Philadelphia. This is like I want to go to Boston.
Right. Instead, you wound up in Lower Slobovia.
Oh, and then after all of that mess, as you just mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm on my way on the Whitestone Expressway, and everything comes to a stop right around Linden Place, where I used to work for a private weather company. And I said, what the hell is this now? It's again, total jam up of cars. And we're moving, Joe, according to my GPS, we were moving at 2.2 miles per hour, crawling at that speed. And then we got onto the bridge, the Whitestone Bridge. And now I'm having the big argument with my son My son sees that there's 4 lanes. 2 lanes take you to the Whitestone. The other 2 lanes take you to the Cross Island.
Right.
So he's saying, and there's nobody on the Cross Island side. He said, so Dad, take the Cross Island. Take the Cross Island. I said, no, we're not taking the Cross Island. Why? We'll go to the Throgs Neck Bridge.
Yeah, no, but there's no direct access on that on the southbound side to the Throgs Neck Bridge. You have to get off at Bell Boulevard and then go over the other side and then get it back on and do it that way. No, you're not doing that.
He's getting pissed off about that. I said, there is no access to the Throgs Neck Bridge this way on the Cross Island. And so we got onto the Whitestone, and that's when we made the discovery. And this is 11 o'clock or 11:15 at night, or we make the discovery that they took out 2 lanes of the Whitestone Bridge going toward the Bronx. And this is why we were crawling across the Whitestone Bridge. But it only took me 3 hours from the time that the game ended at 9:30. And I will admit one thing: now that they have the clock and the pitchers are being forced to pitch within 20 seconds, and all these other things they built in now, these games go fast.
Yeah, they do.
Nice games go like 2 hours and 20 minutes. And you say, so great, I'll be home fast. No, not with all of the CRAP that went on last night in terms of the traffic, in terms of the bridge, the construction, everything. It took 3 hours from the time that the game ended last night at Citi Field to get to my home in Putnam Valley. P.S. It's going to be a while before I go to Citi Field again. Not that I don't like the Mets, but I just don't like dealing with this. And that's my sad story from last night.
On that note, it is now 8:27 p.m. and the Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing weather network on the planet. Use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show for anything you purchase on their website, and you get
10% off.
And Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the phone number for the best prices in town. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. And Tom Contino, no, I'm not going to park my car in Corona on the streets for free because I like to come back to my car. I don't want to find 2 or 3 of my tires missing. No, you don't do that. That's why they have the $40 tariff at the parking area, and all the cops walking around in that area. That's at least I know that my car is still going to be there. No, I'm not going to park on a street in Corona, Queens for just for that.
All right. Folks, we'll see you on Sunday at 11 a.m. Nighty night.
Nighty night.